Welcome to Fantake,
the show where you get the best of both worlds.
But more hold on. But more specifically, we're going to be breaking down different fandoms and their impact on the advertising and marketing industries. I'm Taryn, Aebli, the communications supervisor at the agency.
And I'm Carolina, an operations manager at the agency. And joining us today are two former kids themselves, Bari and Abbey.
Woo!
Hi everyone, I'm Abby Schenker, and I am brand new at the agency. I'm a PR major and a project coordinator here. And ever since I could reach a remote, I've been following Nickelodeon, specifically Victorious, iCarly, SpongeBob. You know where it's at. And we're gonna explore all of these nostalgic films and pixels today.
Hi people of the internet, my name is Bari Elliot, and I'm a graphic design major and a graphic designer here at the agency. And childhood TV shows have had a big impact on my life, especially cartoons. As you can see by my t-shirt here, I'm really into Adventure Time. My fandoms include RuPaul's Drag Race, anime, true crime, anything horror.
So before we dive into the big topics, I think the first question that we all need to answer is, what were your favorite childhood TV shows? My
favorite childhood TV show, as of this moment, is definitely Adventure Time. Because of the new Fiona and Cake spinoff, like I've gotten back into it. I've been rewatching all the episodes, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
I mean, growing up, I would be starting my morning off before elementary school with my brother and I eating Frosted Flakes, sitting at the coffee table with SpongeBob in the background, and that was my routine every single morning for probably 8 years straight. That was my go-to, and then as I got older and thought that I was growing out of my childhood phase, I started to follow Victorious. That became my favorite show, and iCarly as well.
What about you?
Oh, this is a toughie for me. I think it has to be like one of the old Disney shows. Like it has to be Hannah Montana. Like that was such a formative time in my life.
Yeah.
Like she was my girl.
Yeah.
And I'm still a Miley stan to this day.
You are.
I love Miley Cyrus. I saw her in concert. Like it set me on a path.
Yeah.
That led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
And I will always be thankful for my queen, Hannah Montana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you, Taryn?
I would say Wizards of Waverly Place for sure. And then as I was like getting out of the Disney phase, Austin and Ally.
Ooh.
I know you're a Ross Lynch girl.
I am a Ross Lynch girl. Always have been, always will be.
Okay, so to kind of like actually dive into what we're talking about now. So looking back on all of these shows, like which we all loved, we're all going ooh and ah, like at every single answer. So like what made these shows so popular, like especially during our time of childhood TV?
I personally think the quirky aspect of them really got children into the show. It was very different from shows of the past. Like I feel like the progression really started in the 90s with Nickelodeon as a channel, and then all the shows kind of followed suit in that kind of quirky, different kind of look.
Yeah, that sense of humor was very, very distinctive.
Yeah, I would also say Victorious and iCarly specifically made me feel older than I was, and I was craving that. When I was younger, I wanted to feel cooler and look like those girls, obviously. And I think SpongeBob was like the balance to that, so it was kind of bringing out the more humorous childhood side of me, but the other two were definitely to make me feel like I was more mature than I was at the time.
100%. Do you remember all of their rooms were so cool? Like, we talked about this, and it's something we did want to bring up, like, especially shows like Victorious, iCarly, Shake It Up, Good Luck Charlie, Wizards, like, they were like, Zoe 101. Talk about independence as a kid.
The Vespas and Zoe 101.
It was just, they always were like role models to us in a way. Like, we were always looking up to them, and we thought that they were so cool.
Because they were adults in their own little world, you know?
You never saw the adults. You barely saw the parents. Barely.
Never. That's so...
Only really is like what? I guess Hannah Montana and Wizards did. They were like main
but in
characters.
a sense, the adults were children themselves. Like they were very they were juvenile. They were young. Like they were
young. They were very supportive of their independent children's lives.
Yes, like think Spencer, iCarly. He was a kid himself.
He raised Carly.
Yeah,
he was like a second dad to her at that point. Like, and that kind of progressed into that reboot where he's actually acting as a father.
Yeah.
Like he considered himself when it said that Carly was pregnant. She was like, he was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a grandfather. Like, he was like, oh, I'm not going to be an uncle. I'm going to be a grandfather.
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger, I asked my parents, I was like, why are there never, like, moms and dads in these shows? Like, I remember asking that and wondering why they never, like, they aren't apart. And I think it's to make you feel, like, that independence that they're kind of on their own.
And I think it's really interesting, too, because, like, this, like, era was, like, very important for children because, like, we had our own space. Like, these shows were, like, just for us rather than, like, you know, it being, like, a family show, like a Full House, where it's like kid friendly, but this was for kids.
Yeah, it was for kids, but it also was exactly like the perfect audience for them because it made them feel older and cooler. But it was for kids. It wasn't like rated R, you know, it was very PG. But
that reminds me of like how the actors in themselves were in their own world, to be honest. Like with these like award shows that are being compared to like the Oscars and the Grammys and all that. Like, but the Nick Kids Choice Awards, yes. It was really like a reflection that the actors like made it.
Yeah, and like it was just like a kid ecosystem. We had like their like the adults had their fun. They had the rest of the media landscape, but as kids, we had our own little corner, our own little sect that we used to call, and it was like a microcosm. Sorry to use big word out there, but the big SAT word, but it was a microcosm of the world just within just for kids.
Yeah.
Although within that microcosm, I feel like there was a split between Cartoon Network kids, Nick kids, and Disney kids.
And let's talk about it.
Let's
talk about it. What would you say are the stereotypes of each? Because there's big stereotypes of each.
Like, how can you differentiate? Now, let's not say stereotypes, but how do you tell a Disney kid from a Nick kid versus a Cartoon Network kid? Because you can do it with ease.
Yeah.
I will say, I think this is I hate stereotyping, but Cartoon Network kids were definitely on the quirkier side. They were usually more creative, more expressive of themselves, their identity. Whereas Nick kids, I feel like were trying to fit into something. I'm just thinking specifically Victorious. Like, I mean, I'm at fault here. Like, I was that way. I wanted to be. Whereas Cartoon Network, I feel like those kids were exploring their own interests within that channel. But let me know what do you think?
I personally think that relates to like the interest in like the animation side of things. Like me as an art student myself, like growing up, I was so into cartoons because I wanted to make those cartoons.
Oh, that's cool.
How I felt though, like in like contrast, like with like specifically if we're thinking about Disney, those kids like they were trying to definitely copy like that fashion sense.
Egregious fashion crimes against humanity.
Yes.
Oh my god. Skirt over the pants.
Skirt with the leggings.
Vest
Skirt with
on
the
jacket.
See, I wore all those.
Eye
think, like,
sequins.
Pinnacle is also like Shake It Up.
Yeah.
Like, remember Shake It Up fashion? We thought that was so cool.
Ashley Tisdale thought she was such a fashion icon, but then
And she
look
was.
back.
And she was. Let's talk about it.
And she was.
Yeah. What do you guys think for stereotypes? I'm curious.
Disney kids were definitely theater kids, and I'm saying this as a Disney kid and a theater kid myself. I'm sorry, Taryn, you did choir. It's close enough.
You're awful. I would say, I feel like Disney, and I'm not in like a negative way, but Disney was almost more like basic in a way. Like everybody watched Disney, and I don't know, like everybody kind of watched the same shows. Everybody kind of like was trying to be their characters that they loved, like stuff like that. I feel like Nick, you were a little more like raunchy in a way.
I'm sorry, the Nick kids are funny.
The Nick kids are funny.
funny.
I don't think I'm funny, but
I personally think they kind of embody that like raunchy humor.
Yeah, they're a little bit raunchy.
Yeah.
But then Cartoon Network, like you were explaining it, I feel like Cartoon Network kids were very like confident in a way. Like they knew what they liked, and they liked that kind of more
very niche.
Yeah, they was very niche, and they were like they loved it and they were so okay with it. But also Cartoon Network, I think, in my opinion, is a little raunchier than Nickelodeon sometimes. Like the regular show. regular show was raunchy as frick.
Oh, I want to bring up a fun fact about that. The pilot for regular show, the original narrative was that they were at a gas station at like 2 a.m. and then they start taking acid and then they transform into those characters as we know today. So that kind of reminds me of my mom would always say when I would watch Cartoon Network shows, she would say, the people who made these are on drugs. And that's literally what the concept was of that pilot.
So when I say the phrase, the golden era of childhood TV, what made this era so good for Disney Channel, for Nickelodeon, for Cartoon Network? Like, what were the defining traits that made you say this is the pinnacle of television?
I would definitely say gross out humor was a big impact on this period of time. A lot of children were into that, doing gross things like farting and snot and eating the feet stuff. The feet stuff. Oh my god.
iCarly had a lot of that. I think that and the variety that there was at this time, just you can go from Adventure Time to, Victorious, and those are completely extreme spectrums of creativity and expression and total different vibes of people watching that. So there was a lot of options, but I also think it was so perfect at the time because we didn't have anything else to occupy our time. That was our main source of entertainment, which has changed very drastically now. But at that time, we grew up, that was our main thing that we did, We didn't have these 1,000,000 devices all the time at our fingertips, so.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, is because I distinctly remember looking at the guide when I was young to see when the next episode would come out, or if let's say it was a 2-part series, let's say, but stuff like the crossovers and stuff, I would look at when that's coming and then I'd make sure I would be sat at the TV at that time. But now we have streaming. We don't even need to worry about that. So I think it's really interesting.
And that actually ties in perfectly to my point, because my hot take about why childhood TV was so popular during this time is directly due to cable TV. The fact that we had cable and the ability to kind of pick and choose what our interests were within this realm of childhood TV, it allowed people to find their audiences. And even now, when you reflect on some of these shows, they have such strong communities because we were all watching the same thing
at the same time.
At the same time, we were experiencing things. It was like a community of sorts, because you could go to school and be like, oh my gosh, did you watch iParty with Victorious? Did you watch the new episode of Sweet Life?
There's something really valuable about everyone being on the same timeline, which is not how it is now, but that's how it was. So.
Linear. Woo!
Linear TV.
Linear TV.
You had the entire children's market at your fingertips at that point, and they found it and they discovered how to talk to us. Yeah. And it was perfect blend of all these factors.
The generations are just so different. I would tell my younger sister, who's 7 years younger than me, about a show that I used to watch, and she's like, what's that? I'm not really interested in that, because she's from a different time where it's streaming is what's dominant and phones are what's dominant. All she wants to do is scroll through TikTok every day.
I think something else that's interesting about the shows, and I think that's why they worked, is yes, some of them were a little out there, like Wizards, for example. Nobody's going to be a wizard, but they made it really relatable in a way. And, same thing with SpongeBob, too, where they touched on very, real topics, how to be a good friend, handling all that kind of stuff. Hannah Montana handling, secrets with your friends, things like that. But then, SpongeBob was, Mr. Krabs was greedy, stuff like that. And so I feel that's why it worked in a way as well, because the shows handled very real topics and it was written in a very good way for children to understand. And yes, sometimes they were a little out there, but it wasn't too out there. I think of
they had a moral at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think of things like zombies and stuff like that, or I think of more the shows now and the movies now that I see, and it just seemed a little too it seems a little too out there. And especially with DComs. But then High School Musical was so relatable.
Yeah, also by the end of each episode, you're that's what that was about. It all comes together and you're that was the lesson. It's very clear. It's not this long storyline that you're trying to follow. It's like every episode had its own little parts that were important in it. So
yeah, that kind of reminds me of like the concept that like each episode had its own kind of plot. It was different from the TV shows today where it's like this continuous storyline that you have to follow. But then within like the older things, we would watch an episode out of order and it would still make sense, you know.
Again, cable TV strikes again.
Yes.
Cable TV shows.
And that's also, I think, a big part why back then it was the golden era and now not so much, because our attention spans have gone down incredibly. We are all goldfish now, especially the generation below us. And we were able to follow those shows because it was like you start a new one, completely new plot. But now it's like, I don't know, The Bachelor, Gossip Girl. I mean, actually, not Bachelor. Gossip Girl, Vampire Diaries is two shows that I love. It's seasons and seasons of storyline that you have to dedicate and commit and sit down and like process. So it's too much. It's like, yeah.
I'm definitely a binge watcher, but I could definitely just watch like all the crossover episodes of of like all the different shows and just not watch anything else, because those are my favorites, to be honest.
Let's dive into that, because like you truly know like you're at like the peak of something, of creating like your own little cinematic universe, your own little ecosystem. Like when you're fully integrating every single show that you have like with each other. And we've briefly touched on this. Crossovers were like a huge way of doing that, especially for both like Disney and Nick. I think were the two biggest like competitors, especially when they would do crossovers. We talked about a few, like the iParty Victorious. What are some other ones that like immediately come to mind for you guys?
The Sweet Life of Hannah Montana.
That's So Sweet Life of Hannah Montana.
Yeah.
Great one.
I loved the iParty because those two shows I feel like were competing within themselves in a way, like within Nick, even though they were on the same channel, they both were like fighting for like the top show within Nick in my world. And so when they came together, it was like, no, like they're friends. Like we're doing this together. Like both of our characters' shows are high up there, you know?
I think something else that's really interesting about the crossovers is that they really took advantage. I think that's like a perfect example of them really, of Disney and Nick taking advantage of their golden era, of their success, of their peak. They said, it makes a lot of sense of why they did it. They said there's so many of these niche different audiences that are tuning in at the same time. And like there's so much of them, and imagine if we could combine them, then Victorious and iCarly viewership goes up, makes us more money, sort of stuff like that. Like I just think it's so smart, and like from an advertising, marketing, just like entertainment type of perspective, I think it's so genius, and I think they did a really good job of like capitalizing on all of their successful shows.
Yeah. Audience segmentation at its finest.
Yeah.
For real.
You better buzzword.
I think a great example of that, honestly, if we're thinking more on the cartoon side, is the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. Because they did multiple episodes with the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, and they really capitalized on that like interest between the two shows.
For the fans outside, please explain what the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is.
So Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is based off of the shows The Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron. And they would basically go into each other's universes, and I thought it was so cool because they would explore both like a CGI and a 2D style. It was great.
Love those.
The gasp, it was great.
That was one of my favorite crossovers. I loved those episodes growing up. I was so excited someone brought it up. And like the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour also reminds me of like another phenomenon that was kind of like done on these like channels, which was like the themed like episodes. So they would all like be under a certain theme. I remember Disney did When You Wish Upon a Star. So they each had a shooting star go across in like all of their different shows. So Hannah Montana would see the same shooting star that like Zach and Cody did. And that's so Raven would also see the shooting star, and they all made a wish, and it came true for that one episode. Yeah. So it was really interesting to see like how these different shows would like tackle like the same plot line almost. And I think that is also like kind of like synergizing in a way too, to build like oh, I am a huge fan of Sweet Life, so I saw that Zach and Cody became superheroes with their wish, but what did Hannah Montana do with her wish? Like what happened? Like I feel like I'm like more intrigued to like go over, you know, like watch that.
They realized what worked, especially with like those types of themes, and they really ran with it. And they said, well, if it's going to work for Hannah Montana, it's probably going to work for Jesse, and it's probably going to work for Austin and Allie, and whatever it may be.
Did you realize, like, when you were younger watching those, did you realize that theme that was the same throughout?
Yeah, they would promote it like that too. Okay. Like they had like the little commercial breaks in between. They would lead up to it. Like I specifically remember the Nickelodeon one about the heat wave. They're like, oh, everyone's going under a heat wave now. And they'll be like, watch this show and this show and this show to see what happens in the heat wave.
It's a crossover without doing an actual crossover.
Yeah.
I think something else that's interesting about Disney and Nick capitalizing on their success is the consistent use of actors that they use. And if you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Like, think about Zendaya, started on Shake It Up, then went to Casey Undercover. Same actress, different character.
My girl, Ariana Grande.
Ariana Grande.
Everywhere.
Yep.
Everywhere.
Victorious to Sam and Cat. Like, Ross Lynch, Austin and Allie, but then to Teen Beach Movie. Like, stuff like that. I think that's... Miranda Cosgrove was, like, honestly one of the first ones, I feel like.
Well, it started,
and,
like,
I guess,
kind of before her because it was Amanda Bynes on all that on Nickelodeon, and then getting her own spin-off show with the Amanda Bynes Show, and then Drake Bell and Josh Peck being plucked from the Amanda Bynes Show, and then going to Drake and Josh, and then Miranda Cosgrove getting plucked from Drake and Josh, going to iCarly, and then Jeanette McCurdy being picked from iCarly, going with Ariana Grande, making Sam and Cat. They're all connected.
That's crazy.
And you get to watch them grow up. I mean, Miranda Cosgrove, we saw her in Drake and Josh when she was a little girl, and then we saw her all the way until iCarly when she was the star of the show. So it's crazy how that can, like, you're growing with her, you know?
Well, it's interesting because also they'll have Easter eggs to other shows. Like, several Drake and Josh characters were canonically in iCarly. Like...
Good word.
Thank you. But, like, they were characters on Drake and Josh, and they also exist within the iCarly universe. But then that also brings up the question, well, why is Carly and not Megan, and why is Spencer and not the crazy guy who worked at the movie theater? Like, so there's a lot of like.
Oh my
I didn't
gosh.
realize.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little slips. Easter.
Do you think they did that purposely, like repeated actors and stuff?
I don't think it was on purpose. I feel like it's more so like a nod to the people who watched the previous shows, and it was like, oh. Like, for the fans who watch Drake and Josh, here's the Drake and Josh characters.
Yeah.
But so we can talk about, like, the peak of, like, childhood TV without discussing, like, the Disney pop phenomenon pipeline, okay? Like, you think of, like, your typical Disney Channel TV, like stars. You think of Hannah Montana. You think of Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, and all of these artists and how they've transitioned into, like, the music industry because of Disney Channel. And
Bridget Mendler, Hurricane. Bridget Mendler.
Like, I was wondering.
Bridget Mendler, my queen.
Bridget Mendler, for real. Like, I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on, like, on that pipeline of, like, Disney making, like, pop stars in that during that timeline, not just among kids, but just in general, because, like, Hannah Montana was charting on the Billboard Hot 100. Like, she was not just a child name. She was a legit force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
I personally really like that they actually included her transition from Hannah Montana into Miley Cyrus in the show and within the movies that subsequently came after. I felt like it was like an interesting way to like imbue her own life story, which she did multiple times like throughout the different like episodes. Like her horse in Hannah Montana is based off like a real life horse that she had, and her mother is based off of her real mother.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as like these shows were a stepping stone for them, so it launched everything, and I just hope that they look back and like they're grateful for that, or like at least, do you think that is the main thing that got them the success that, I mean obviously along the way, but do you agree that that's what launched it initially?
I'd say some of them, yes. Like Hannah Montana, Ross Lynch really capitalized on it. Selena Gomez capitalized on it, and that made sense for them because they could sing. Not saying that some of the other ones couldn't, but like they definitely tried to force it on a lot of them. They saw the formula with Hannah Montana and they said, let's turn this into a real thing and let's do this for all of them. If we can have, because they're making, think about it, they're making a profit off Hannah Montana and all this stuff.
An additional profit off the music.
Off the music. So if they can do that with all their stars, let's do it. So I think of Zendaya, Replay. I think of
that song though.
Great song, and she ate.
Phenomenal song.
But like, she wasn't meant to do that. Or I think of TTYLXOX.
No, you're missing my biggest one. Sneaker Night by Vanessa Hudgens is one of the worst songs ever made, but it's so camp at this point because of how bad it is.
Yeah.
The lyrics, basically what we're gonna do is dance.
What
so
is it
basically
called?
what we're gonna do is dance.
Oh, that
I
song.
have not heard
Sneaker
that.
Night.
Yes.
Stream Sneaker Night by Vanessa Hudgens.
Dance.
That kind of brings up the question, like, Victorious is a show, like, literally everyone in that show could sing. Do you think that was, like, intentional to try to bring out their singing careers in general?
1000%. I think it was mainly a vehicle for Victoria Justice, but the fact that all of them can sing was definitely intentional because they had seen. I feel like Nickelodeon definitely copied Disney in that sense of like they saw like, oh, they're making pop princesses over there. We need to fight back.
Yep.
The music aspect of Victorious is what made me love it so much. I feel like every episode there was a banger in every episode.
And at that time, Big Time Rush also on at the
Big
same time.
Time Rush. Big Time Rush.
Love Big Time Rush.
The
so
Nickelodeon
much.
version of the Jonas Brothers, if you
Literally.
will. Justice for Jade. Underrated.
Underrated.
So underrated.
Justice for Cat too.
Justice for Andre. Justice
Andre.
for Andre. Andre was one of the best singers on that show. And they didn't do Andre justice.
Did you know he just won a Grammy?
He did.
Yes, he did. Yes,
Andre
he did.
Grammy winner, as it was written.
For SZA, right? Was it
Yeah,
SZA?
SZA.
Yeah.
He wrote Snooze.
Damn right. Damn right. I'm gonna say it.
So as we've established, the music is so important to many of the TV shows that we loved from our childhood. And so we wanted to play a little game with you guys to test your knowledge of your favorite TV theme songs from these shows in a game we like to call Grab the Mic. Welcome to Grab the Mic.
Where we're gonna have our guests try to finish the lyrics to popular childhood TV show theme songs. Check it out.
Timmy was an average kid, and no one understands. Tom and Dad.
Tom and Dad. Real. Tom and Dad.
You're still. Mom and Dad and Vicky.
I forgot the rest.
The correct lyrics are, Timmy is an average kid that no one understands. Mom and Dad and Vicky always giving him commands.
That far, no matter where you are, 'cause no one's gonna make it come true.
That's like
That's the second lyric. Yeah, I think we give it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Break it down, let it rain down. No, don't hold back, don't hesitate when you go big time. Oh.
Yeah. you got it the second half.
You did, isn't it make it count, play it straight, don't go back, don't move back, don't hesitate.
Close.
Don't look back, don't look back, don't hesitate.
Hi, James. And hi, photo of James. That's funny.
When the crowd wants more, I'll bring on the thunder. And you got my back, and I'm not going under.
Yeah.
Where's the earnings?
Hey Jesse, hey Jesse.
Give me one more line.
Feels like a party every day. Hey, just say
yeah.
And form.
You're just
It's you got it, you got it. That's all we probably know.
if you don't know it weighs 365 days.
You got it, you got it.
I did I take over the chorus?
We'll give it to you if you take over the chorus.
I am, you are, we are exceptional.
Yeah!
Yeah.
Good job! That's funny. Okay.
So clearly that was a team effort. So congratulations to both of our guests. And now back to the show. just talked a lot about the golden era of these childhood TV shows, but when do you think that golden era ended?
Bunked.
Real! That's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. Bunked was, yeah.
So basically what Bunked was supposed to be a spin-off for Jesse, and they brought the kids onto a summer camp, and the reason why it was so bad as it progressed was because it went on for like 8 seasons at this point. It's still going, actually.
Wait, what?
It is.
But it has none of the original actors that were in it. Except that one girl, I forgot, I don't even remember her name, but she was like one of the camp counselors.
That's a problem when you continue a show and replace the actors. Not a good strategy in terms of advertising because people like consistency and familiarity. I agree with that because I remember turning on these channels later on, a few years later, after that prime golden era, and some of these shows would come on and I'd look at it and be like, what the heck happened? Just shows that they felt like they were trying so hard to continue this like really good era of it, and it just wasn't working. Bunked is a good example of that. So.
In my opinion, Austin and Ally was kind of the end.
I was gonna say that. I was like, to me, it's like the beginning of the transition to the end. I'm like, it's sort of the end, but it's also sort of still like somewhat decent.
Yeah, and like early Austin and Ally was like prime. Like that was still in the golden era. I'd say the later episodes of Austin and Ally was the ones that a lot of people don't really know about. And I think that's when it kind of started downturning. Not that the later episodes of Austin and Ally are great, in my opinion. I love the later episodes of Austin and Ally, but like not a lot of people know those because that's kind of when things started going downhill.
I would honestly say that's within Disney, but within Nick, the point that it dropped off was definitely Henry Danger. It was one of Dan Schneider's last shows before they took him off Nickelodeon.
He was
and it's the same thing where like you don't remember the last episodes, and then they started doing this other show that Dan Schneider produced called Game Shakers. Yeah. And it was just so bad. Like like the plots just didn't even make sense. The characters were kind of bland. I was just not into it anymore.
So do you guys think that the end of the golden era was because of the shows that were coming out, they were less creative, or do you think it was like a larger environmental factor? Think of like what was happening like in these like the tens, the late tens, you know, like streaming is just starting to become a new thing. YouTube is becoming very, very popular. Do you think it was more environmental or just like the content itself?
I think it was a big mix. It was mostly the environment. I think it started with those shows coming out that were kind of just falling off, and then it turned into like the competition within so many other like options for entertainment. I mean, as you said, YouTube, TikTok, I mean, it was Musical.ly at the time, but that became huge. Having younger kids having phones much earlier and iPads and iPod touches, there were just way more things to do other than sit down and watch these shows.
I was definitely drawn to social media as soon as it came out, and once I started going on social media, I really stopped like watching TV that intensely. And, like
a lot of people stopped watching TV.
Yeah, like instead of like going to iCarly, I was going on Tumblr before I was allowed to have an account, and I was getting my entertainment from there pretty much.
You know what's interesting to think about? iCarly kind of highlighted the YouTube side of it. I feel like Victoria's highlighted social media in a way.
The pair phones.
The
slap.
Slap.com. Where's my pair pad? But like, I think it's really interesting because I wonder if like, this is literally just a random question, but I wonder if like we saw the slap on Victorious and we saw YouTube on iCarly, and then we got exposed to YouTube and like Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and we were like, oh my god, it's like the shows, and then like we almost went there. You think about that?
Maybe unconsciously.
Unconsciously, yeah.
I think it's interesting because you bring up a good point about like how they were kind of like cringe, like when you like looked at like these shows like social media presences, because before it was these writers and like these companies of like Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, they were kind of deciding what the cultural conversation was, and they were deciding what's funny for kids. But now the power was kind of like shifted into the people. Like you had things like Vine and Musical.ly coming up. So now like we were deciding what was funny, and we were getting exposed to like a lot of things from like much smaller content creators. And they now were out of control of what was funny because now they're just trying to play a constant game of catch up. of trying to be like, oh, what are kids into? And I feel like they're still not caught up today. They don't know what kids are into.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a reason of why that game of catch up is why childhood TV shows aren't really working. But I'm curious to hear about what other reasons you guys think childhood TV shows aren't necessarily working today.
I was going to say, too, in terms of the catch-up game, we can go back and watch those shows now at any time and feel that nostalgia. But the generation below us, they didn't grow up in this golden era, so they don't have that same fondness towards these shows that we did growing up. So that there's a lot of disconnect there. They didn't live off them, you know? It's a very different time of growing up now. Going off of that weirdness, Nickelodeon, in my opinion, has kind of fallen off because they turned it more into this, like, game show slime carnival. Like, it's way less like the go-to shows, and it's now all these new rebranded, like, oh, and next up we're gonna have blank blank be covered in a bunch of slime, and it's like it just seems so ridiculous. I don't know. I feel like it's going off of, like, there's just, I don't know, it's getting a little too crazy.
Yeah.
I think personally in that aspect, they're trying to take advantage of nostalgia because, like, getting slimed was, like, the main thing of Nickelodeon in the early 2000s, like, especially with the Kids' Choice Awards, like, and the cartoon bumpers.
Also the TV shows that they had in the 90s, like Double Dare and, like, the other, like, game shows that they had in that
Also,
era.
like the Nick Hotel, where they had that giant slime bucket and they would dump every couple
That's
years.
gone now. They got rid of it. Even though I personally wasn't part of that era, I was really interested in the concept of those shows from, like, documentaries I've watched in the past, like All That and Amanda Bynes Show and Secrets of the Hidden Temple, Double Dare.
So do you think that Nickelodeon is trying to revert back to, like, their first, like, golden era, to, like, hey, this is how it all got started. Let's try to do something that isn't these, like, shows to try to, like, recapture some of the magic that we once had.
Yeah, because I feel like it just doesn't age very well, because a lot of these, like, things that might have been funny in the 90s and, like, early 2000s might not be as funny to people now.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I feel like Disney and Nick both, especially, are really milking the kind of their golden eras. And I think a prime example of that is all these spin-offs that they're doing. And that's something I really want to get into. It's just, do you guys think they're kind of going overboard with milking this? And I don't know.
It's just the nostalgia. Do you think they're capitalizing too much on all this nostalgia? Because we've talked about the iCarly reboot. They did a Zoe 101 reboot. They're doing a Wizards of Waverly Place reboot.
That's So Raven.
They have Raven's Home. Even, like, going back to, like, Boy Meets World has Girl Meets World now. So
Yeah.
what are you guys' thoughts?
I personally I was like super excited when they first announced these kind of things, but then when I started watching, I'm just not really into it. It's kind of, yeah, they're trying to, like, rehash, like, new, like, older concepts that like don't relate to us anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, I think especially with the iCarly reboot, that was just, like, raunchy iCarly. Like, it wasn't, like, everyone found it really cringy because it was just, like, the only difference is Carly is now swearing or something. Or, like,
iCarly for adults.
Yeah, like, and it's just not working. But what I also think is interesting is an interesting case, I think, is The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody and The Sweet Life on Deck, where The Sweet Life on Deck was a spinoff. But it's one of the only successful ones, I feel like. I don't think Sam and Cat was that successful.
No, I was also going to say that was the end of the golden era for me, too. I was like, Sam and Cat tanked.
I loved Sam and Cat. I'm a Bibble girl.
Why do you think they're making the decision to milk the kind of golden era, make all these reboots, instead of making new ideas?
I personally think that's the state of the industry in general, not just with TV, but also with movies. They're just kind of running out of original ideas to work with in general.
Yeah.
It's scary. Like, there was a lot of time. There was a span of time where I felt like a new movie hadn't come out, and I know this is separate, but hadn't come out in months. And I feel like back then there was always new things coming out, and now I feel like it's weird because you would think we have more creativity and expression, but it almost feels like every good idea has been taken already, and there's so much to compete with.
And that's a valid point. Again, microcosm. Children's TV is a microcosm of what's going on in the real world, and nostalgia factors in, like, a huge part to like our current media landscape. So it makes sense it would factor into children's landscapes too.
Also, I talked earlier, was that during the golden era of the shows, they brought on a lot of like real concepts and things that weren't too far-fetched. Like, yes, there were wizards, but they brought in real concepts. But I think I saw a TikTok the other day, and I'm sorry I don't have any off the top of my head, but they showed like, it was like one of the TikTok slideshow things, and it was the current Disney Channel shows, and they were just like weird concepts. Like, I don't know how kids are relating to it, honestly.
Do we think that's just because we're old now? I mean, it kind of has some truth to it because kids aren't watching it, but...
Yeah, but it was like, there was nothing really like Good Luck Charlie, where it was like a girl vlogging with her family. Or like, what's another good one? Like Austin Alley, like even though it was like this kid is an internet pop sensation, like that's still not far-fetched. But I'm talking like, we're zombies in a high school sort of thing.
Zombies.
Yeah, like just kind of strange concepts and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like mentioning Austin Alley, I feel like that's kind of a reflection of like an actual like real thing that happened. Like Justin Bieber became an internet pop sensation. I feel like that's where they got their reference from in that situation.
I think what they're struggling with is this trying to replicate what was and what worked back then without copying it completely, and trying to mix in what is working now. And that is very hard to find that middle ground of like, you can't do exactly what we did back then, so what are we supposed to do now?
Like, it'd be interesting to have like a show about like a kid influencer in a way, and like their
influencers.
And think about like an iCarly, but like in like a Charlie D'Amelio type of context.
Did they not try that with like Bizarre?
Yeah, I was just about to mention Bizarre Bar. That's literally what that is.
That's Olivia Rodrigo's show. And Jake Paul's show.
And that show was not great.
Yeah, but wasn't it skit type as well?
I feel like...
Wasn't it like, because they'd go to like this studio or whatever, and they'd have different sets, and it'd be them trying to film videos. But I'm talking like more like casual. Where like imagine like Good Luck Charlie, but like
a lifestyle vlogger.
Yeah, but like
I think the truth is it's not interesting. like we see their life, we see it in the video.
True.
What else are you gonna show?
Speaking of Bizarre Bark and Olivia Rodrigo, I feel like when we were talking earlier about how music stars kind of came from their shows, I feel like Olivia Rodrigo was kind of the exception to that rule, because like no one really remembers her from Bizarre Bark, to be honest.
I did not even know she was on a show.
I would qualify and say Ariana Grande is the exception, because she developed Victoria Justice was the main star of Victorious. It wasn't meant to be Ariana Grande or anyone else.
Yeah.
She sprouted kind of on her own and developed like independently. I feel like that was like around the time where these channels started to like falter, because who was like the next big star that came after Ariana Grande? Silence. That's what I thought.
Speaking of Ariana Grande and Tori, you guys heard about like the drama that kind of went on?
So you mentioned Ariana Grande, but what other child stars do you think turned their childhood TV success into post-childhood TV success?
Jenna Ortega, in a way, did. She was in Stuck in the Middle originally on Disney Channel. And then from there, she was Wednesday Addams on Wednesday. And she was the star of the new Scream movies, which personally I don't really like. They kind of ruined the franchise. But anyway.
Like, I think she's such a great example, too, because, like, these other, like, stars that, like, I first think of, like, when I was a kid, I'm like, oh, Jonas Brothers, Miley Cyrus. They had to work so hard to get their, like, Disney branding off of them, but because, no offense, Disney Channel was faltering at the time, Jenna Ortega didn't really have to work that hard. Her show wasn't that popular, so she just immediately went into like the prestige side of acting, you know? Now she's being considered for like Emmys and Oscars.
I feel like another big one is Zendaya. Yeah. Where I feel like Zendaya is one of the very, very few that has seamlessly gotten rid of the Disney name. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the actors that were really successful post Disney and Nick or whatever went through their like rebellious era. Think Demi, think Ariana Grande a little bit.
She had her Dangerous Woman
for sure. Little bit Sabrina Carpenter now, honestly. But like Zendaya was just like I'm a model. I'm gonna act, like, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. And, like, now you don't think of Zendaya Shake It Up. You think Zendaya just, like, the icon, the queen, the everything. Like,
you guys keep saying, like, brushing off that Disney kind of brand. What's, like, that like, is that a bad thing to have that? Not that it's a bad thing, but
that's a good question.
You know, that stigma, what is that, how does that surface?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing for these, like, stars when they're trying to develop, like, further careers. And no one will take them seriously because they are so associated, like, oh, you're a child star. You deal with kids. You're not ready for these adult themes. And often, like, they wouldn't be given these opportunities because, like, if you would, like, look at Miley Cyrus, like, you know the audience that she's going to bring. She's going to bring in all these, like, tweens. Yeah. They don't want to see Miley Cyrus tackle, like, this rated R film. Yeah. Like, they want to see Hannah Montana, but just in a different movie. Yeah. So, like, it's getting rid of that and being able to, like, pursue their own, like, creative pursuits and, like, being able to, like, take, like, actual prestige things. Like, I think, like, Zac Efron a lot, too. Because, like, Zac Efron.
Talk about rebellious area, Zac Efron.
Like, because, like, they all have to, like, experiment with drugs and, like, alcohol to prove that they're adults. And to say, hey, I can do adult things. I'm not just for kids.
I think, like, Neighbors and stuff. Yeah. I think another interesting case, sorry to bring it up, but Ross Lynch. Seriously.
Let's talk about Ross Lynch.
Seriously. Hear me out.
Hey, Taryn, do you like Ross Lynch?
Hey, I unfortunately was not a One Direction girly. I was an R5 girly till I died. I loved R5. But what I think is really interesting was Ross Lynch had Austin and Ally. Then Disney realized he had this family band with all of his brothers and sisters, R5. They capitalized on that. Think Loud, right? Everyone knows that. Loud.
I know that song.
And then they kept going with R5, but then, like, they kept having, R5, like the Disney band. Ross Lynch and his brother Rocky Lynch said, no more, shut down R5. Also, like, his sister was having children and stuff like that. But, like, then now there's the Driver era. And it's still the same band. Like, it's still his brothers and sisters, still on tour with all of them. It's the same band, it's the same group. But they said, we're just going to completely rebrand, cut off, start a new brand, start a new band, period, and move on. I think that's an interesting case because it was almost like they tried so hard to get rid of the Disney name, but they just couldn't get rid of it. So they said, I'm cutting it off, starting fresh.
As opposed to, like, Jonas Brothers or Big Time Rush, who, like, kept their names but still were able to, like, go on and make their music independently later. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I will say with Big Time Rush, I will always connect them back. I feel like they haven't brushed off that name. But
I was so excited that they were doing basically a revival concert. Like, I really wish they would like stay together always. I love them as a band, and like I feel like they're different from the Jonas Brothers in a way because I feel like the Jonas Brothers can stay on their own sometimes, but they're always a team.
Like, personally, I'm biased. I'm a Big Time Rush girl. Those are my boys. I went to that concert twice, and their most recent concert I had to skip out. It was so heartbreaking. Right. Like, I think their new music is actually somewhat pretty good. It's really interesting, though, because when I went to the concert, there were a lot of teenagers there. They found a lot of TikTok teenagers because during the first concert tour that they went on, Dixie D'Amelio was their opener.
Oh, right.
So you're getting a lot of, like, these kids, like actual kids still going to Big Time Rush concerts. Yeah. And then you had, like, the other half of the audience, which was the adults, being like, I loved you when I was 13. And, like, it was a very weird dichotomy because, like, I was fourth row and, like, next to me was, like, an actual, like, child. Oh. And I was like, how do you know them?
You don't know what I know.
I was like, you loser. Stupid.
I think something you said that stuck with me before was how trying to brush off this brand also forced them to grow up much quicker because they were trying to prove to everyone that, like, no, we're not young anymore, like, we're done, like getting involved in drugs and stuff like that. It's very obvious in many different, many of these stars that are now stars today.
So you guys mentioned a lot of your favorite childhood TV stars and the characters that they've played. So for this next segment, we wanted to test your knowledge on the characters that they've played in a game we like to call Heads Up! Welcome to Heads Up,
where we are going to describe a character from a popular childhood TV show without saying their name or what show they're from,
and our contestants are going to have to guess who it is.
Check it out. First one. Chicago!
Trina Vega.
Yes. Okay, so he was a middle child in a really big family, and he was always getting up to mischief and little pranks and just like overall tomfoolery. This was a Disney Channel show. It was a lot about vlogging. Y'all gotta help me out here.
He had a nemesis.
He did have a nemesis. He had a big nemesis.
Yeah.
The Disney show where they vlog with Bridget Mendler.
Oh,
That's the show. What? Yeah.
is it Gabe?
Yes, it's Gabe. Oh my God, don't forever.
I'm sorry I took that so long.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay, we can't say their names.
This person is iconic. They had a little brother.
Happy birthday!
Gibby.
Yes! And this is from that same show. This guy, he was there, like the hotel, like front, like concierge person.
Lubert.
Yes, yes.
Oh, but not Gabe.
This person yells a lot. They're always like shaking. They're an anxious mess.
They're like they would say something along the lines like, "The walls are alive!"
Yeah.
Andre's grandma.
Damn. Yeah. Oh, I got that one.
This person's actually in multiple shows,
Yeah.
but how do I explain this? This person's also very paranoid. Worked in a movie theater.
Crazy Steve.
Yes, Crazy Steve. Okay, this is from an animated Disney show. It's about a lot of adventures, and they live in like a woodsy area. There's like a mysterious Illuminati triangle. That's the villain of the show. It's the sister.
Mabel.
Yes, Mabel Pines, Gravity Falls.
Go ahead.
He owns a surf shop, and he's like a little child that terrorizes the cast of this.
Rico.
Yes.
Oh,
Rico Suave.
This person was the weirdo of the bunch, I'd say. Always doing strange things. It's an interesting name. It's a show where it's like a high school, but they're all really talented. And he was
Robbie?
No, you're so close.
Close.
St. John.
Yes.
Okay, so in this like magical little Disney show, this girl had the best fits of all time. She invented fashion.
Harper.
Yes, Harper Finkel. True.
Okay, this is the last one, I think,
I think it is.
This person, animated show, a badass,
Yes.
knows karate.
It's like a scientist,
It's a
very
mammal
smart.
living.
Sandy Cheeks.
Sandy Cheeks.
Yes.
And the winner is
Barry!
Congratulations to Barry, and let's get back to the show.
Barry, Abby, thank you so much for coming on to Fantake, and thank you so much for watching.
Thank you so much for having us all. I had a blast.
Thanks, I had so much fun.
to keep up to date with this series and see what fandoms we're going to talk about next. Be sure to follow us on all of our social platforms at the agency at UF.
And always remember, good luck, Charlie.
Do, 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 do.